Hi everyone, I'm Chris Golson, and I'd like to welcome you to Minelab's instructional video on the GPX series metal detectors. In this video we are going to be talking about both the GPX 5000 and the 4800, which are Minelab's most advanced gold detectors to date. Metal detecting is my passion. I've been doing it for over 15 years now, and I've traveled all around the world. And that's one of the things I love most about this hobby. I've spent months living in the outback of Australia. I've traveled all around the United States. I've been down into the jungles of South America and even clear up to Alaska. My metal detector has given me a reason to go to these places that I might have never seen before. And I've made some really good friendships and have picked up some pretty nice nuggets along the way. Now during that time, I've had the opportunity to use just about every gold detector that Minelab has made. And I can tell you from personal experience out in the field that the new GPX models, specifically the 5000 and the 4800, are truly Minelab's finest. And I say that for a number of reasons. First and foremost would be the performance we are getting from these detectors, the technology that Minelab has given us. We can go in and work areas with extreme ground mineralization, very noisy soil conditions, and lots of hot rocks, and pull gold from these areas that we could have never heard before. Also is the amount of depth penetration that we're getting. We're no longer limited to a few inches. I've personally dug nuggets up as deep as 3 feet. These are incredible machines, but the real beauty of them is their simplicity. Minelab has made these detectors easier than ever to use, so even if this happens to be your first detector and you have no experience, using some of the factory presets, you can literally be out there detecting in moments. Brilliant detectors, very easy to use, and our goal in this video is to demystify the settings on this machine, to explain to you in layman's terms what all the settings are, what they do, and when you should change them out in the field. Now, we have a limited amount of time, unfortunately, in this video, so I would encourage you, if you have any other questions or you would like more information, to visit Minelab's website at www.minelab.com. There's a wealth of knowledge there, articles, pictures. They have some great videos there. There's also a forum there called Treasure Talk. You can talk and chat with experts and people from all around the world and learn even more about this wonderful hobby of metal detecting. Before getting to the instructional portion of the video, I just wanted to take this opportunity to share with you some of the finds that are being made with these Minelab detectors. Now, what I've brought today is just a small sample of the gold that you're likely to encounter. And I wanted to start you off with some of the bigger nuggets. This one was actually found in Arizona. This is about a 5-ounce piece. And this one's a little larger. It came from Australia. It's about an 8-ounce nugget. Now, these big nuggets are wonderful. Everybody wants to find the big nuggets. These are the trophies. This is what it's all about, and it's an excellent day when you do. But big nuggets are rare. They're a little harder to find. What we typically dig up on a normal outing is something more along the lines of this. It's a little bit smaller gold. This is what we call our bread and butter gold. And you can see there's all different shapes here. And look at how tiny some of these pieces are. And you know, when you dig them up, they don't look like a whole lot, but at the end of the month or the end of the season, you know, they really do add up and you've got a lot of weight there. And that's one of the amazing things about the GPX detectors, is that not only can I go out and dig pieces like this, you know, at depths of several feet, I still have the ability to go into highly mineralized soils, into patches that I've already hunted before, and still pull out little nuggets like this, some of them weighing less than 1/10 of a gram. So let's move on to the actual instructional part so you can get out there and start finding some gold. We won't go into any great detail about the assembly of this machine. I'd have you reference your instruction manual, but they're fairly easy to put together, should probably only take you about 5 minutes. This is what a completed detector looks like, and there's 3 components. We have, the first is our coil. This is the portion that we actually swing over the ground. The next would be the shaft assembly, and this is what holds the entire detector together. And lastly is our control box. Real easy to put together, but I will give you a few tips. When you do it, make sure that your handle is on and it's always facing forward, otherwise it's going to be really tough on your hand. You want to make sure that your coil cable is strung nice and clean like this. You don't want big windings hanging off loose here where it's going to get snagged in bushes and tree branches. And you want to leave enough play in there to where the coil can rotate without a lot of strain on it. You also want to make sure that when you snug up the coil connector here, push it in nice and tight, tighten it down. You don't have to go real tough, but make sure it's not wiggling around. Probably the most important thing is your own personal comfort. You want this machine to feel good because you're going to be spending a lot of hours out there swinging it. The bottom end here, if you twist this knuckle, the bottom end is adjustable. You can lengthen the coil shaft. You can also move the position of this handle to make sure it feels comfortable for you. So in other words, you don't want to be having to slouch down like this when you're detecting. You want to make sure you're standing upright and everything's comfortable, because the more hours you can put in with this detector, the better odds you're going to find gold. Both the Minelab GPX 5000 and the 4800 are powered by this lightweight lithium-ion battery. And I really like this battery. It weighs less than 2 pounds, and it should run your detector for about 12 hours when fully charged. Now it's supplied with a 12-volt vehicle charger, and also a mains charger that you can use at home. And the nice thing is there's a little LED light on here. So when the battery's low and you plug it in, it'll turn orange. After typically about 3 to 4 hours, the little light will go green, and that lets you know that the battery is fully charged. Now, this is our power cable. You'll also get one of these, and this is what connects your lithium battery to your detector. So when you go to turn the machine on, you're going to want to make sure that this is plugged into the battery. And again, you tighten this down, and the other end would go straight here into the back of the machine and plug that in. Now on the other side of the battery, you'll see we have a 1/4-inch jack there. That is for the headphones. So these are actually the supplied headphones with the machine. They're made by Koss, very good company. I've been using them for about 12 years. Very good quality headphones. You would just take this jack here and plug it right into the other side. Now, another feature of this battery is that it actually has a built-in audio amplifier, which is great for people with maybe a little bit of hearing loss, or if you just like to have a little more volume, you can control that right through the detector. But it also allows us to use external speakers, which is a really nice feature, especially if you're hunting in rattlesnake country or you're hunting with a friend and you want to be able to stay in contact. Now, Minelab supplies the GPX detectors with a padded harness. And essentially this goes around your body, up over your shoulders. It's fully adjustable. The pouch here on the back has some Velcro. And what you do is you just put your lithium battery into this pouch, and it's going to sit right behind your back. Now, if you're right-handed, you want to make sure that the silver connector is on the right-hand side. And if you're left-handed, you want to do it the opposite. So you just put your battery in there, tighten that down, connect your power cables, put it on, and away you go. Here I have the control boxes for both the GPX 4800 and the 5000. And as you can see, the physical appearances of both is nearly identical. And in fact they are, aside from the search mode switch is labeled a little bit differently on the 4800. But the way that you interact with the machine is identical. There are differences, but that's internally. So for the purposes of this video, for all of our demonstrations, we're going to be using the GPX 5000. And if there are any differences between the two, we are going to make reference to those for the 4800 users. Both units utilize Minelab's patented technologies, including MPS, which is multi-period sensing, DVT, which is dual voltage technology, and along with the newer SETA technology, which is smart electronic timing alignment. And basically what SETA does is that it ensures that the detector is precisely aligned for each timing option. And what that does for us is it makes the detector less susceptible to certain types of interference, and it also significantly reduces the effects of certain types of magnetic rocks and soils. It helps to keep our detector running smooth, the threshold will be more stable, and we can pick up nuggets that other people might have missed. Now, we haven't gone into great depth on the technology. I would encourage you, if you would like to know more about those technologies, to please visit Minelab's website at minelab.com. They have a much more detailed description, but in this video, we're not so concerned about what the technologies are. We want to know how to use them so that you can get out there and find more gold. Let's talk for a moment about search coils, what they are and how they affect your metal detector. Now, the search coil, or coil as we usually call them, is the device that we use to transmit and receive the signal that's picked up by the metal detector. It's essentially an antenna. Now, the ones that I have here are actually built by Minelab. These are the Commander series, and as you can see, they come in all different shapes and sizes, and choosing the right size and configuration is really going to be dependent upon the area you're detecting, the conditions there, and also the relative depth of the soil and the size of the gold. Now, there's really two types of coils that Minelab offers. We have the mono loops and the double Ds. Now, the monos are essentially a single winding of wire wound inside this coil that both transmits and receives the signal. The double D coils are actually two windings of wire, and they look like the letter D's put back to back, so we get double D. One side transmit, the other side receives. You'll also notice that the shape is different. This one happens to be a round coil. This one is what we would call a semi-elliptical coil, and the shape does affect the performance. The elliptical coils are very handy for getting into tight spots around brush, getting up amongst the tree roots and bushes. And the round coils are generally a little bit better for wide open spaces and a little better depth penetration. This one here is an 11-inch. I have a 15-inch here. This one's a big giant 18-inch. And then down here we have our small little 8-inch. Now, when would you change coils? And why would you change coils? Well, it's pretty easy. First thing you'd want to do is look at the ground that you're hunting. In this area that I happen to be sitting on, this is a lot of exposed bedrock. The ground is extremely shallow. If there was going to be any gold in here, it would be very easy to detect. So we'd want to coil a small coil. Small coils offer a lot of sensitivity. They don't go very deep, but they're very good at picking up tiny pieces of gold. And in here, we know the ground's not very deep, so a small coil would be a great choice. Also, if we were going to be detecting in heavy brush, lots of bushes and rocks, small coils are much easier to maneuver and get around obstacles. Now, the big coils like this 18 would be more suited for wide open ground. Fairly flat ground, maybe such as that found in the outback of Australia or even parts of the western US. If you have ground like this that's wide open, you want to put on a big coil because you can cover a lot of ground quickly. A big coil is also very good at finding targets at depth. We lose a little bit of sensitivity to the tiny nuggets, but if you're in a spot that has produced large nuggets and you know there's some depth in there, a big coil is definitely going to be the way to go. And one last thing, you'll notice all of Minelab's coils are supplied with a skid plate, and a skid plate is this bottom portion. It's a plastic, essentially a piece of armor that you can use. So as you're out there swinging along and you might be scraping your coil on the rocks, you're not going to cause any damage to your coil. You're going to wear out this skid plate before you do that. And I always recommend that you check your coil periodically, inspect it for wear. If you're starting to develop holes or cracks, pop off the skid plate, put a new one on. They're very inexpensive compared to a new coil. So lots of options out there, and you just need to really examine the ground that you're in to choose the right coil. We're calling this portion of our video the Quick Start, and its purpose is to show you just how easy these Minelab GPX detectors are to use. Now, I know there's a lot of switches and dials and things here. Don't worry about that right now. We're going to discuss all those things in more detail later. But right now, I'm just going to show you in a few simple steps how you can adjust this detector and be up and finding gold quickly. So the first step we're going to do is make adjustments to the front panel. First thing you're going to want to do is make adjustments to your search mode here. You're going to want to put that switch in the general position. The next switch down is the soil timings. You're going to want to put that into the normal position. Next is the coil RX switch. Now I'm running a double D coil, so I'm going to make sure that's in double D. And on our ground balance setting here, I'm going to go ahead and move it over to fixed. Now that we've made all the adjustments on the front panel, our next step is going to be to turn the detector on. And you do that using the little silver switch here on the back. It's labeled on off. Simply click it and let it go. You're going to hear the detector fire up, normally a high pitch followed by a mellowing of that sound. Okay, everything seems to be working. So now what we're going to do is our auto tune, and that's going to help clean up the threshold. And we do that by simply pressing this little black button here on the front panel labeled auto tune. You press it in, and while you do this, you want to make sure that you keep the detector steady. You don't want any metal to pass across it. You don't want to move it. Just hang out here for about 60 seconds. And right now the machine is scanning all the possible channels, looking for the quietest one. Once the detector is finished with the auto tune, we're going to hear 3 beeps. Okay, now our detector is properly tuned. Next step and final step is going to be to ground balance the machine. So we need to check our switch here, our ground balance switch. We're currently in the fixed position. What we're going to do is, I like to just put my finger on here and start pumping the coil towards the soil. And you can hear we are out of ground balance. We know that because you can hear that sound as we lower the coil towards the ground. While we're doing this, we're going to throw the switch into the tracking position and keep pumping the coil. And you can hear that the sound is just really, really reduced. When we don't hear much change either way, we know the detector is balanced. We simply go out and can start hunting gold now. Now, as you're detecting along, you're going to hear little signals, little changes in the threshold, and that's totally normal. You know, it could just be something like atmospherics or changes in the ground mineralization. What you're looking for are signals that are repeatable, that no matter which way you go over them, they're always there, they stay steady, and okay, that's a very good signal right there. That's a good example. And you can hear that. Nice signal, crisp signal. It's telling me that it's probably not a very large target. It's probably fairly small, but it's very close to the surface. I know that too because the bedrock's exposed here. So that's a good signal. That could very well be a piece of gold. And I am using the double D coil, so the strongest signal we're going to get is going to be straight down the center of the coil, like a strip. And that's wherever you hear that loudest response, that's probably going to be dead center in the coil. So let me see if I can pinpoint this. Okay, it's probably sounding like it's right in here. Also, you'll notice that if I stop the coil on top of the target, it eventually just goes away. That's because these detectors are a motion detector. They need to be moved, and as soon as I start moving again, the target should come back. There it is. So I'm guessing that target is somewhere right in here. And the first thing I'm going to do is just come up and we're just going to kick away any of this loose rock here. Just move this out of the way and recheck. Okay, that's a good sign, it's still there. You want the targets to stay in the ground. So then using your pick, just scrape away a little bit more of that dirt. Okay, so it's no longer where it was originally. I've moved it. So it's now in the pile of dirt that I pulled out. And I stress that you recheck your hole often. That way you don't dig a 1.5 foot hole and have the target come out on the first few digs. So I know now that it's in this dirt here. I'm going to grab a handful of it, and you can wave it right over the top of the coil, just like on the bottom. It's just as sensitive on the top as it is on the bottom. So I know it's in my hand now. I'm going to split up about half that material. Okay, we don't hear any signal in there, so we know it's not in this hand. You can just set that down there. I'm going to pour half of that dirt again in here. We know it's in here now. And you just want to keep doing this back and forth, whittling the pile down, making it smaller. It's in here now. And we're probably to the point where we can see it. And I do see it, unfortunately. It's a bullet. It's a piece of lead. Maybe looks like a .22 caliber bullet, but That's our target. So that gives you an idea of how to pinpoint. The double Ds, like I said, do best down the center. If you happen to be using the mono-loop coils, those, in my opinion, are a little easier to pinpoint with because they are sensitive all along the outer edges, and you can actually turn the coil on edge and use the edge of the coil as a pinpointer as you get close. But pinpointing is just one of those things. It takes a little bit of time, but with some practice you'll get it. And the quicker you can get the target out of the ground, the better off you will be because it's a numbers game. So get it out, look at it, put it in your pocket, and keep going. You'll notice that the GPX detectors have two sides to them, and these are the control panels. Now the one that faces away from you as you're metal detecting is called the front control panel. The one back here with the little screen, the LCD, this is the rear control panel. And what we're going to address first will be the front control panel. And as you're looking at it, you might notice that it seems almost as if these are upside down and maybe MindLab made a mistake. No, that was done actually on purpose. And the reason they did that is just simply to make it more easy for us in the field to see where our settings are at. On the early machines, the settings were labeled sideways. So we actually had to kind of turn the detector box and look sideways and see where we're at. By putting them upside down, MindLab's made it easier for us because we can simply raise up the detector and very quickly we can see where all of our settings are at. So simple, but it makes it definitely more convenient. Now, we're just going to go straight down the list here. I'm going to talk about each of these settings and what they do. The first on the list will be this little black button here. This is the auto tune button. And what that button does is it helps us reduce the effects of interference. Now, interference can come in many different forms. It's generated by a lot of different things. The most common is from power lines or other metal detectors or perhaps even electric fence or a radio tower. Anything that can generate kind of an electromagnetic signal or a field has the potential to interfere with these machines. And when that happens, you'll hear it. It's very easy to notice. All of a sudden, your threshold will get very erratic. The machine will seem to bounce up and down. The sounds will be very gritty. You will know something doesn't sound right. What this button does is when we press it, the machine automatically scans through a big number of channels available. There's up to 255 channels available, and it just rapidly goes through each of those channels, scans it, and it's looking for the quietest one. Very handy to have, great addition to these machines. They allow us to work closer. If we're out with a friend, maybe metal detecting, we can now hunt very closely to each other without interfering. And we can also get even closer to power lines. It helps the machine keeps the machine running steady, and it only takes about 60 seconds to select the appropriate channel. Our next setting is the threshold, and that is this black knob here. The threshold is an important part of metal detecting. It's the constant hum, the constant background hum you hear when you turn on the metal detector. And what that does is it provides our ears with a reference point. It's kind of a baseline. You're always hearing the sound, and not all targets that you encounter are going to give a very loud response or a very definite response. A very deep nugget or a very small nugget might only cause a subtle little signal. By having that threshold there, it's very easy for our ears to pick up that change and alert us that, hey, we might have gone over something, maybe you might need to dig a little bit and investigate. You'll notice on the threshold, if I were to turn it up, it's going to get louder. And then if I was to turn it down, it's going to get quieter. Now, the threshold is really a matter of personal preference. Everybody hears a little bit differently. I've known some people that run with no threshold. They run the machine completely silent. That's nice because it's not as tiring on your ears. It's not annoying listening to that hum. The problem with that is if you don't have that reference point, you're not going to hear those subtle targets. On the flip side, I've known people that have ran it way up. By doing that, you're bombarding your ears with this constant loud hum. Again, that has the potential to mask faint targets. So my personal recommendation to you would be to set your threshold as low as possible almost like a little mosquito humming in your ear. And you want to set it just very low, but make sure it's steady. You don't want it choppy, you don't want it breaking up. Just a nice, low, mellow hum, kind of like a mosquito just buzzing in your ear. Our next switch down on the list here is the search mode. And the search mode, I'm just going to refer to these as pre-factory presets or pre-programmed search modes. And what these are is Minelab has went through and given us options. Perhaps if you don't want to have to spend a lot of time making adjustments to the different control panels, you can put in one of these pre-programmed search modes and just start hunting gold right away. You'll notice on this one here, on the 5000, it's labeled Deep, General, and Custom. So in other words, if we were out in the field and we were mostly interested in looking for deeper targets, you could simply select the deep mode, the deep search mode, and now the detector is optimized for looking for larger, deeper targets. General would simply be at a new location, we're just doing some general prospecting, the conditions aren't overly noisy, aren't overly deep. This would just be a general catch-all kind of setting. Now, if you happen to own the 4800, this setting over here will actually be labeled High Mineral, and on the 5000, it's labeled Custom. High Mineral on the 4800 would just be if you're in an area with lots of ground mineralization, lots of hot rocks, you could select High Mineral, ground balance your machine, and go start hunting gold. Now, on the 5000, if we select Custom, we get access to 4 other search modes.